right, welcome everybody. Jeff Wilkinson here again, retired quality engineering lead from Accenture, with you as always, and my co-host Parasar Saha from Digi4, the CEO, is with me as always, and we have a very special guest today, Aravind Kannan, who is Director of Software Engineering for eBay, so a high-tech company in the Valley, and so we love to get his impressions on some things that are focused on quality. What I found in my career is that my company and I myself learned a lot from high-tech companies because they were so cutting edge in what they did and from a quality perspective and a development perspective overall. So I think we'll get into a lot of discussion around how things evolved and Arvind's experience and what he's seen. He's been around for quite some time. So Aravind, before we even get into questions, why don't you spend a little time just introducing yourself and what you've done that's really interesting in your career.
Great. Thanks, Jeff and Parasar, for having me today. And yeah, I mean, I work at eBay, and I lead an organization called Delivery Engineering. And what we do is we build the continuous delivery platform, right? And also the testing frameworks around it. And there's also when we talk about continuous delivery, it doesn't go well without metrics. So there's a extensive analytics and metrics platform focused on software delivery, right? Like what happens from the code being created until the point that it goes out to our customers. So we track every part of that. And also there's it is highly critical for us that we have good velocity in terms of software delivery for our engineers. So we focus a lot on that, and there is a really good initiative within the company called Velocity Initiative, and most of the things that we do are targeted to that. And so from the career perspective, I joined eBay more than 10 years ago as a senior software engineer, and have been fortunate to be involved in the platform side of engineering and build multiple frameworks and technologies that helps our developer community within eBay. And now I'm a director of engineering, leading the organization. So that's where I am right now, and helping eBay to go faster and enjoying every bit of it.
Fantastic. And you've been in the industry a long time. You've seen it evolve to where it is today. Let's take a step back in the Wayback Machine and talk about kind of where we started, right? With you mentioned continuous delivery. Continuous delivery is omnipresent right now, but you probably saw it from the dawn of continuous delivery, Waterfall before that, and this notion of the train system, which high-tech companies use quite a bit, where you get on a train and you get into production, and if you miss the train because you're not ready from a quality perspective, then you got to get on the next train. Talk a little bit about what you saw as the evolution from Waterfall to the train system to where we are today with continuous delivery.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, so it is interesting that you talk about train, right? Because when I joined eBay, that's what we were doing. We were doing train-based developments. So it's basically a scheduled rollout, right? That's what train typically is. So they either had 2 weeks rollout. There's a certain date. So if your code is ready by that date, tested, then it goes out. Otherwise, if you miss that train, then you have to wait for the next train, which may be 2 weeks later. So so typically with the train, there's always the developers build the software, and then there's a handoff process to quality engineers. So the handoff process is where quality engineers do basic acceptance test and then see is it even testable? Is it ready for that kind of white box testing that used to happen back in those days? And then quality engineering team accepted it. They did their whiteboard testing, and that was it was sequential, right? Development process was done, testing started after that, and then they had to finish everything within the train. So if there was a slip in the development date, so there was dates set earlier, right? The handoff dates were set. If there's a slip in that, there is a big risk that the train can be missed, and you wouldn't be able to make your code change to the users.
It's interesting you say 2 weeks for the next train, but in today's world, it could be 2 hours, right? So what has happened in the industry to allow us to get to the point where we can have let's call them what they are, production releases, right?
Yeah,
In
yeah,
hourly production releases.
absolutely. Yeah. So that's where we're going towards now. So, right, like because we're not doing train anymore. Like we've moved towards like a complete continuous deployments ecosystem. So again, there's a key difference between continuous deployments and delivery, right? Like continuous deployments is where you don't have any manual approval step. So you write the code, you write the test, push it in, everything is tested, and there's absolutely zero manual intervention after that. Automation takes care of it, and the code, the build rolls out to production to our users. But continuous delivery is everything is same, but there is a manual approval step in between, right? So that's the continuous delivery. So that's how we started. So when we started moving off from train, thanks to the velocity initiative within eBay, that's where the big push was to go continuous deployments, right? And we started with like continuous delivery, where there was like manual approval process, and then slowly like we started like removing that. And one of the impediments for that is um, SOX segregation of duty compliance, right? That's a very important thing to take care of. Because like we being a major like e-commerce company and like we handle like payments, we want to be like, very careful with all of our compliances. And SOX SOD is one of the critical ones to make sure it's ensured if we are going continuous deployments. Um, because as per that, like all it says is that a reviewer has to be there for every code, or like I cannot be writing code and pushing it to our users without anyone else like taking a look at code or like reviewing it and approving it. So we have to ensure that as part of the continuous delivery system. So we did that, and then so now like about like more than like 85% of our deployments are going through the pipelines, and we are about like 75% continuous deployments, and we are like trying to close that gap in and cover the other 20%. So our goal is to hit like 90% continuous deployments. So that's where we're going towards. And the automation plays a huge role in this, right? Like because without test automation, it is just not possible to go and do anything that's closer to continuous deployments. So we had to remove all the manual processes involved and like automate it. That means like every level of testing is automated, right? Like unit tests, sure, like everybody writes unit tests, but there's like integration test, and there's also like visual regression tests and like several types of testing that needs to go in that we automate as part of the pipeline. And of course, like some of the challenges that we saw along the way and we are still seeing is like how do you improve the debuggability, how do you ensure that the root causing of failures is like very quick, right? When the code fail, like when the tests fail in the continuous delivery systems, when you're focusing on the end-to-end test and integration tests, when they fail, um, pinpointing to the area of failure is not very easy generally, because if it's unit test that fails, we can always say that it's this line of the code that has the problem. But when an integration test or end-to-end test fails, pinpointing is a problem, right? So those are like important problems to take care and like bring in help our engineers to debug the failures faster. And so that's where like we are going towards like 1 hour uh, from the time that a pipeline starts to going to the production.
I'm glad you mentioned automation. We'll let's spend a little bit of time on that. Before we do, we got to talk about why we've moved from a waterfall world to this continuous delivery world, and why the trains have shrunk from 2 week time periods to hourly or 2 hour periods. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I'd love to get your perspective on this, but it could be moving to more of a digital world where people are requiring software to be updated almost real time, right? Getting into production as quickly as possible. In the old days, in old days, 15 years ago, people could actually, do every month they could do a release, and if they did it more than that, then they risked creating quality problems, and the quality problem you had to do regression testing and all that sort of stuff. The digital revolution pushed us towards a more frequent release process, and you can't be successful with that without some significant automation and some sophisticated automation. So talk a little bit about your experience in moving to more of an automated world. What kind of automation did you use? Did you use model-based testing? What tools did you use? Did you use open source? What was your experience with that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's a critical part, right? Like so. We built our in-house tooling around automation. So we built our like in-house frameworks and tools to take care of automation. And yes, of course, like we built it on top of like open source because I mean, anything that we need to do, like we do this analysis, right? Do we buy the solution or do we borrow like from the open source world, or like do we build it? So most often it ends up in a combination where you take something from the open source and build on top of it to customize it. And if possible, wherever possible, we contribute it back to the community. But like wherever certain things are like within specific to eBay, like we keep it within. So that journey was an interesting one because when we started, we wanted to build a single unified testing framework, right, which takes care of mobile, uh, iOS, Android applications, and also our web browser applications. And then we were quite successful in doing that, right? Like because we're at that point we had like a unified experience, and we wanted it to be like eBay's site to look the same if you're looking at iOS, Android, or the web. And so we built a framework where you write your functional test once, and it can execute on all of the various platforms where the user experience is present. And that's how we started. And then we also learned, like in a business wise, we learned that it's not the best to give the same experience across devices. And then we had to like tailor the experience based on the devices. And when we did that, there's also like at that I mean, after that point there's an evolution, right? So anytime when we build something, we also have to think about like how the technology, underlying technology itself evolves. So X3 test and Espresso came in, and they were able to give much more like powerful testing in a native way.
Mm.
Then moved our automation towards that specific platform specific, right? And then we still kept our rest of the automation in terms of like on the web browser on this framework that we had. But then this is a second step of thing that we found along the way. So our framework was a Java-based framework initially, right? Like so, people wrote that test in Java, and then came in like Node.js, and like the people like who wanted to write like the front-end test wanted to keep the code close to the application code, which makes absolute sense. Then like then we had to build a framework which is specific to JavaScript, so people who are writing like front-end code and like they want to keep the code as part of the application can do that, and makes testing much more easier, right? So all of these things were the evolution that we went through, and along the way, accessibility is an important part. So we build tooling to ensure that the code that we write, the front-end code that we write, are accessible, right? And it has to help everyone equally. So we focused on accessibility testing, and that became part of our automated tests. And yeah, visual regression testing is something we do. Of course, like LNP testing is important. And tooling wise, two major options that we have are like JMeter is one, and also there's this nice tool which I lean more towards is like Gatling, which is Akka based, and write your simulations as code and assert. You can say like test this servers with like 50 users at once or 500 users at once, and ramp up 5 users every second and things like that. And you can also add assertions. You can say ensure that all my calls return back within a certain milliseconds, like 100 milliseconds. Do 95% of my call return successful, or like do 100%. You can like tweak the assertions to do that. So these are like good toolings as well for load and performance testing, and that's something that we do as well.
It's really interesting that you have chosen to do an in-house set of tools, an in-house platform for your automation as opposed to looking commercially. And there's a lot of companies, there's almost a religious debate about whether they should use open source versus using a market-based tool. And I've seen it be successful both ways, but there's pros and cons of each. Did you kind of go through a process of determining which made the most sense for eBay?
Absolutely. Like like not everything that we do is like in-house built, right? Because there are certain tools that we have to go external as well. For example, like certain on mobile testing, right? Like when we need something in terms of a device form to run on, I mean, we tried that. We tried to build certain things internally too, and then like we found that okay, in this case, it would be cost effective for the device form to be external, and we use Google's Firebase test lab, right? So there is always a pros and cons that we'll have to do, like in terms of using something from external, or like go and like build something on your own. Building is definitely going to be costly initially than going with something external. So if I were like probably like I mean the decisions would be different, right? If I were like working on a smaller company, or like in a company where the focus is completely on a on the business mostly, and like not about like technology, then the choices are different. So also it's about like where the expertise lies, right? Like if there's expertise, then we can build it, but if not, like then we will have to go with like external
Right.
solutions.
Pros and cons, as we always
Yes,
say.
absolutely.
So as we move to this continuous delivery model, and agility becomes very important, right? Getting new functionality into production, into the marketplace for eBay. It's people seeing that on their phones, or on their laptop screens. Um, how do you organize your team to be agile like this? Do you have an onshore, offshore approach? Do you have a centralized approach, a testing center of excellence, a quality engineering center of excellence? How does your organization match the need for agility?
Sure. So the things that we do is like, I mean, we've tried multiple things, right? Like we've tried like separate quality engineering organizations and like developer organizations. And so as we progress towards continuous deployments, where code is written, committed, and it goes to production automated, um, we kind of like merged both the functions together. So there's like engineering group, which means like developers, quality engineers. There's no differentiation in terms of roles. So everybody writes code, everybody writes tests, right? So then the focus is mostly on the automation side. So
Mm.
that way, the code, the testability of the code needs to be ensured at the earliest phase, right? So that's where we are going towards. So in order to, I mean, like also like things like BDD. I mean, TDD, of course, is like very, very important. Like we are going towards like BDD as well. So again, like that helps with agility. There are like several organizations where this transformation has been done, but still like there are like more organizations where the transformation is an ongoing process.
Just in case somebody might not know what BDD and TDD are, behavior-driven development and testing-driven development, talk a little bit about why BDD is important to a good holistic quality engineering approach.
Absolutely, yeah. So we are building software to cater to the business, right? So and that means like it's like how is the user behavior being met with the software? Like are we enabling the right user flows? So that's where like BDD really comes into picture. So the product owners can actually like define their acceptance scenarios on like what are the behaviors that the software is expected to meet, and that can be coded. Doesn't have to be a language like Java or things like that. There are tools like Cucumber and like several other options where you can use to write BDD, which are like behavior flows are captured, and then when you write your test, you test that against that, right? I mean, when you write your code, you test it using these behavior BDD tests, behavior-driven development tests. So that's where it becomes very important for us. And also, it's not something where like we wrote the software and then we are going to figure out like how to write the test for that, right? So still, like a lot of applications do that. I'm not saying that all of eBay has transformed to this. A lot of applications still do that. It's an ongoing transition that we are.
Yeah, good. All right, well, I'm going to steer our conversation into a little different direction. Before I do, I want to make sure Parasar has a chance to ask any questions you might have pertaining to what we've already discussed. Parasar, anything?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. So one of the things, like, you mentioned that, you're heavily using like automation, and the initial part of the discussion you mentioned about the analytics framework that you guys have, right? Automation, analytics framework, and then you have a continuous testing, right? So can you dive a little bit more into that? Like, how is that analytics framework, like, that you have seen helping in that continuous testing process?
Sure. So it comes into like now two things. One is actually looking at your test itself, right? Second is like looking at the big picture of your software delivery. So when we're looking at the test, like a proper test results analysis systems become like extremely important, right? Because that's where I mean, let's say I have like 20,000 tests written. Now, if 100 of them are failing all the time, right? Like it's not like very unheard of to for teams to have that accumulate the tribal knowledge of that failing test, and like, oh, these tests have failed, I know about this, I can pass the release and we can go ahead, I'll fix this later, right? Versus like, no, they are failing now, we got to fix them in order for the release to proceed, right? We can either like remove them or fix it, right? There's only two options. If their tests are failing, we either have to remove them from the suite. If they're not important, then let's remove. If they're obsolete, let's get them out. Or if they're important, let's fix them, right? So I think that kind of uh, thing has to happen in a centralized way, and that's just like one example, right? And again, the second thing comes about like, where do I see the steps of the tests that ran, and where there's screenshots, where the logs captured, how do I analyze this, is there any intelligence built into the platform itself which can do the analysis for me and give me some pointers? So all of these things like become important, right? So that's where a proper test results analysis system comes into picture. And also, like if there are flaky tests, right? Like if they're able to identify flaky tests and the system can surface it, that becomes a big help, right? Because certain tests can fail for no reason. It might be badly written test. Maybe there's an asynchronous call happening somewhere else, or there's a dependency on certain tests. And if tests are not able to execute in isolation, that becomes a problem, right? If there are dependencies, if the orders get changed, then they fail. So now there is like best practices to be developed and followed, but there's also like, I always see it like in two ways. There's a process, right? And there's also a technology solution, right? For certain cases, there may be a process solution, but in this scenario, the process best practices, laying out all of that will help developers to follow the best practices. But we always need a system to help everybody, right? The system can capture it and surface it if best practices are not followed, if mistakes are being made. We are humans, we will make mistakes. If mistakes are made, the system needs to catch it. So that's an important aspect. So
That's why
that's
we have testing teams, right? Because humans are humans.
yes.
Yeah, I think like you well put that we all can make mistakes, right? I completely understand that you value that test reporting part. Like we in the testing world, like we see the data, we kind of like day to day see the reports, but as a leader in the organization, how do you see the business looking at these reports? What do you see that the QAs are helping the business to make decisions through these reports?
Yeah, so test reporting, to be honest, like we do not use that much on the business side, right? Test reporting is purely for the engineering side, is like how we use it. The business side, again, there are like different metrics that we look at, analytics where like experiments are run and things like that. So that's what the business looks at. So test reporting is more like for engineers. That's how we use test reporting. And of course, like, on the other side, like there's, we measure like the delivery performance itself, right?
Okay.
So how is the code being written? How quickly is it being like reviewed? And I mean, what are the different types of tests running? How much time do they take? How long does the build take? And all of that, every aspect of the continuous delivery deployment time and things like that. So those are the things that are useful on the business side, because when you go for the accelerate the DORA metrics, right? So if you look at the lead time for a change, that is a very important thing, right? Like how, so if I have an idea, how soon can I get it to production,
Right.
right? First time to market is an important aspect. So we measure those things, and that's where the whole velocity initiative like revolves around, and that's critical for business for us.
Okay, got you. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for kind of explaining how they look at it. So over to you, Jeff.
Yeah. Thanks. Good
Yeah.
questions. And so I want to steer us a little ways away from what we've been discussing and more towards what I think we see as the disruptive technologies that are impacting quality, and quality is impacting these disruptive events as well. One is artificial intelligence, and another is cloud. And I'd like, if you could, Aravind, to address how you see artificial intelligence evolving and cloud evolving in technology, and how quality must respond to these two disruptive technologies.
Absolutely. So again, cloud, when like I said, like one of the example is the device form that we were like contemplating about, like should we build it or should we go out to an external cloud? So in this case, we went to the cloud. But for other cloud, like we have our own internal cloud built, and we use that. So cloud is like extremely important. for development and testing. It makes life so much simpler and brings, I mean, containerization just changed the world, the way that we develop and deploy, right?
Theoretically, if you had access to a SaaS program in the cloud, where if you needed some kind of quality service, you could reach out on the cloud through a service to grab that service and then use it for a defined period of time. Is that something that would be attractive to you? Would that be something you'd leverage?
Yeah, no, it really depends on the business needs, right? Like again, it is a complex problem to solve. So I think like when businesses are focused on their end users and are do not want to invest much on these kind of solutions, it's easier to go for an external one and go for a third-party based like cloud providers. But again, things to take care are like security, right?
Yeah.
Like security, data privacy, these are extremely important to take care of. And as long as these are taken care and like internal needs are met, I think the cloud providers are a good option. And
Yeah.
cloud is an important part in development and testing.
I like to think of it as sort of like an Amazon marketplace, but for quality. Maybe even an AWS, right? Web services for quality. If that's something that's attractive to you, that's that's I think a little bit what Digi4 is trying to accomplish with their product. Okay, so that's cloud. What about artificial intelligence?
Yeah, again, it's the newest technology, right? And multiple things can be done with it. It's very, very powerful. And again, right from having things to like complete your code. So it started to help with code, right? Like, so again, there are multiple solutions out there which will help sit in your ID and like as you type. Like earlier, we used to have the type ahead, and like auto completion was there for like a line or two. Now, like the entire methods can be completed for you, and comment and say like I want a function to do this and that, and you get that. But again, reviewing them is like very, very important, right? Like it produces the results, but we as humans have to review those and come up with.
Are any of your developers worried about being replaced by ChatGPT or equivalent?
No, actually, it's the other way, right? Because we think it can help us a lot more than anything. It can make us faster, help us a lot. And I see like Parsar's hands raised.
Yeah, Parasar wants to ask a question.
Yeah. AI always excites me, right? What's there in the world of AI that we can actually grab from the quality engineering perspective, right? On one side, like we see that, development world, DevOps world is kind of fast adopting AI, right? What would be your thought as an industry leader? Like, where you see, like, you would expect industry to focus on leveraging AI into quality engineering space?
Yeah, no, I would say like every aspect of development, right? Like
Mm.
right from like coding, we talked about that a little bit, where AI can help with coding, but then comes like along with coding comes the test as well, right? Test generation itself. I think AI can play a huge role in test generation itself, like unit test and like even the integration test and end-to-end test. And then comes the log analysis, right? Like when there are failures, how do you connect the logs? Like there's like typically if you're looking at like your end-to-end test, you're looking at the UI and a button is missing. Now, why did that happen? Was this something on the JavaScript side, or was this something that I expected some attribute from a service that's like seventh level deep in the graph? So that kind of investigation takes time, right? You have to read through multiple applications logs and go through the graph, and like if you don't have distributed tracing, it's harder to find the root cause. Now, log analysis is something that I think AI can help a lot with. Finding the right problem, summarizing it, and surfacing it so that the detection of the problem is like few seconds versus several minutes to an hour or so. That's one big area. And also checking for the quality of test, right? That's a big problem. Like checking for the quality of test is it's not just about code coverage, but are you able to see if the quality of test is good enough? And test can be written when people can miss assertions. Code coverage will still say that yes, the code you have high code coverage, but it's not being tested. So checking those things. I also think that it could help with code reviews, right? Code reviews.
Yep.
You automate the test reviews. So that's another area where it can help as well. So there are multiple things, of course, that AI can be leveraged for.
So while AI and cloud are disruptive, they're also starting to become old news, right? They're not the big thing of the future. They're the big thing of right now. What do you think is the next big IT disruptive technology?
Again, so at this point, I think it's about using AI and doing something that is disruptive, right? Because AI, I think it has become like internet, right? Internet was there. We did like a lot of amazing things with that. Now there's AI. Um, of course, like this, like LLMs are available. And what do we do with that, right? That's where I think the next disruption is. And I think this was a time where
The flying vehicle, is it, is it autonomous self-driving cars? What might it be?
yeah, no, I think from my perspective, this was like at a point where we built a testing framework, and it was more like you can give it certain requirements, and it will automatically generate tests. So we built something like that like 9 years ago, and we were then joking within the team that there should be a point where give a business requirement and say, okay, give me the product, and the product is out there.
Yeah.
So I think we might be going to something like that soon, right?
Yeah.
Like in our I don't know if it's going to be in the next decade or like when, but I think AI can enable all of us to go towards a future
Sure.
like that. Ideas are out to the customers sooner.
And I think virtual reality and augmented reality, they have not quite met the promise that we expected. But when I actually tested Meta's Oculus and loved it, I immediately saw the opportunity that it presents. It has to work out some tweaks, like everything, right? You got to work out the tweaks. There's going to be regulations that are going to focus on bad actors that might come to use virtual reality, might use the artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, for example, incorrectly. So we're going to continue to see that evolve over the next several years. We are bumping up on time. I have one very cool question I want to ask you before I do that. Parasar, anything else?
I think we have been talking about really innovative things and latest technologies and things of the future. How do you see a career of a QA person, especially focused on technology, kind of shape up in future?
Yeah, no, I think QA is an important role, right? Because specifically there are some edge cases where developers who are like very tuned to the code and technology like are going to be missing, and there is a unique role like where specifically there's like some of the manual testers who can think in terms of exploratory testing and like capture things. So, but again, with all the evolving technology and everything else, and move towards continuous deployments, I think the roles are like merging, right? So the role of QA and developers, in my opinion, is merging to one and the same. It's like engineers. So everybody writes code, everybody writes tests. So I think from that perspective, it's about building solutions that can speed up entire development faster is going to matter more. So I would say like lean more towards technology and automation all the way, and that's where I see the transition is, right? And also like we discussed, multiple AI based solutions are going to come in soon, and getting adopted to that, like staying in touch with the latest developments in AI and trying them out, building tools out of them. All of those things are going to be very important.
Yeah, I think it's expanding beyond dev, it's DevOps, AI, data engineering, like everything coming in, right? You have to know certain part of everything to kind of be the next expert in the QA engineering. So great to know your perspective on it. So I think that's it from my end, Jeff.
Well, I just have a very simple question for you. I love a softball to you. Most people know, hopefully all of our audience knows that eBay is an online auction house. And I was just wondering, what is the most interesting thing that you, as an eBay consumer, have bid on in your time there?
That's an interesting one. Yeah. I'm curious to know.
Yeah. It was a Pokemon card for my son.
Oh.
So again, like I buy a lot of things on eBay, but
Yeah.
mostly those are like household things that I need, and like of course, like it's a big marketplace for like new things as well, right? So I do buy a lot of those things, but like Pokemon and like several things. Like my son like comes back from school and he's like, "Hey, Dad, like I saw this cool Pokemon," and he talks to me like it's an investment that he has to buy it now and like keep it for like 5 years and he can sell it for much more money. So he treats it like stocks. So that was an interesting experience, like bidding for what he wanted, and it was from Japan.
Very cool. It's nice that you can tell your friends and family that you work for a company that kind of has defined cool during the media, the high tech age. So well done on that. And with that, I think we might have lost. Oh, you're back. Okay, very good. We'll wrap it up now. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, Aravind, or any questions that we should have asked that didn't?
Okay. No, I think like we covered everything, and it was good.
You want to add
Similar.
any comments, any suggestions for the industry, like anything you want to add as a closing
Yeah,
note?
industry wise, I think it's exciting times with AI and all the technological development. So I think from our perspective, it's about like staying on top of technology and building the right tool sets to cater to our customers, and delivering it like faster to our customers. I think that matters a lot for every business, right? So yeah, I mean, I think it's important for us to get comfortable in getting uncomfortable, right?
I love that. Yes, get
Love that.
comfortable being
Yes,
uncomfortable.
absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that's going to be the next decade for us all. That's at least my perspective, and I think embracing the new technology. Then, like, I know, like Jeff, you asked me about this. Like, are people worried about AI replacing? I think that's where I'm going towards. But I think we need to look at AI as something that will help us and speed us up faster to do the things that we love to do in a faster way.
Very good. Well, thank you, Arvind, for your time today. Really appreciate it. It's been enlightening. Love hearing what you've had to say, and hopefully we'll be able to talk to you again in the future.
Yeah. Thank you, Arvind, for like this conversation, like really insightful, like seeing how like the technology is getting used at the core of quality engineering and your thought for the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Parasar and Jeff. It was wonderful talking to you. Thanks.